January 31st, end of the month. We got through the first month of 2021 so far. Will we get through the rest of the year? Who the fuck knows? But anyway, this episode of Grindhouse Purgatory takes me back to either the mid or late 70s. It was like at the time when real urban blight, for lack of better words, was creeping into certain neighborhoods. And there was a film playing at my favorite New Jersey grindhouse, the Embassy Theater on Main Street in Orange. And that film was something called Shanghai Joe. And looked like it was a kung fu film, but somebody named Klaus Kinski was in it. And I was into Klaus Kinski at that point in my life. And I figured, hey, what the hell? Another kung fu, whatever the hell this thing might be, with Kinski. So drove down to the Embassy Theater, and the neighborhood was completely gone to shit then. The candy counter was closed. The balcony, there was a big board across it, so you couldn't sneak up there and do anything. And the clientele was just a bunch of fucking dopeheads. Menacing dopeheads, but, you know, I really didn't give a shit. I just wanted to see the movie. So this thing takes place in the Euro West, because it's a spaghetti western combined with a martial arts film. The star of the film is Chen Li, who really isn't Chinese. He's a Japanese man playing a Chinaman. When asked the director about, you know, his choice in casting, he said that basically he was the best man for the job because he was a good fighter. So obviously there weren't too many Chinese actors hanging around in Italy at that point. But of course, you know, we're back to the old Euro West where, you know, Joe wants to come to America and be a cowboy and pays for a ride on the stagecoach. But, you know, the racism is in full swing because they won't allow him to ride inside the coach. He has to ride up on top of the coach. So he only paid to get to Texas. So the minute they crossed the Texas border, they dump poor Joe off. And he's in the middle of nowhere. So he does wrangle a sort of a job. They're going to try to get him to be a cowboy at a ranch. But the sentiments against him, as one guy remarks, he goes, "We finally got rid of the Indians and now we're up to our neck." That set the tone for the whole film. He gets into a card game in the bunkhouse, which he wins, and basically the four guys that he beats try to beat the shit out of him when he's asleep and take their money back. But he gets the upper hand on them through his martial arts skills and decides that he doesn't want to work there. Well, he had done some kind of deal where he gets a horse. So a couple other cowboys approach him about, you know, we'll train you to be a cowboy because we know you're tough. We heard about what you did back there. And we're basically, they're not herding cattle. What they're doing is it's a slave trade thing, and they're herding Mexican peons for this rich rancher who busies himself and probably saw Django a lot by shooting the peons. So, of course, when they're herding these peons, the rurales or the federales, whatever the Mexican army is, come into play. So the guys herding the peons don't want to get caught herding them, so they start shooting them. And Joe takes umbrage to this whole thing and basically kung fu's to death a couple of the bad guys. One peon had survived, and he takes him back to the village where he meets his voluptuous daughter. And I guess her name was Maria, because every Mexican woman in these films is usually Maria or something like that. And of course, she is smitten with Joe. But now this rancher who was abused by Joe, because Joe actually went to the ranch to straighten this shit out, and when things didn't go his way, he took the rancher with him and dumped him out in the middle of nowhere. So this rancher is righteously pissed off at Joe and decides to send 4 killers after Joe. Joe was worth $5,000, dead. So the 4 killers are Pedro the Cannibal, Murray and Sam, Tricky, and Jack the Scalper. These guys are all played by familiar faces in spaghetti westerns who were obviously hurting for work, and their appearances were basically a little more than a cameo in the film, because the hawk-faced Robert Hundar plays Pedro the Cannibal. Gordon Mitchell plays Burying Sam. Giovanni Stuart Rossi plays Tricky, and Klaus Kinski plays Jack the Scalper. Well, first up is Pedro the Cannibal, who decides to, he wanted to cook Joe. He said he wonders how Chinamen taste, and it's either he's really hungry or he's really very lonely out on the prairie. So Joe sort of martial arts the shit out of him and kills him with a pot of boiling rice. Next up is Burying Sam, who dug basically one of those punji steak pits out in the middle of nowhere, and Joe falls into it. And Burying Sam starts walking toward the pit with a shovel, figuring he can just cover up everything. Mitchell sings some weird little song he made up on the way, wandering around down there on set, and they let it in. Joe obviously wasn't impaled on the spikes, pops out of the pit and beats the crap out of Burying Sam and ends up flipping him in to be impaled on his own trap. Tricky is a gambler, and he decides the best way to get rid of Joe is to lure him in the saloon and basically blast the shit out of him. So he has one of his minions tell Joe that, because Joe is looking for a doctor now because something's going on with Maria, that the doctor is in the bar and he better come in before the doctor drinks himself into oblivion. So Joe ain't stupid. He grabs the guy outside, switches clothes with him, and throws him through the batwing doors, where the guy is blown to pieces by the gunfighters. Of course, Joe goes in and takes care of everybody except Tricky. Tricky decides to be magnanimous and not do the whole thing, and walks toward Joe, and Joe knows something's up. So when Tricky goes for the hideout gun, Joe lashes out like this and comes back with a fistful of Tricky's eyeballs in a pretty gory scene. So the doctor goes out and takes care of Maria, but on the way back he is met by Jack the Scalper, played by Kinski. And Kinski is weirder and creepier than usual in this. He has this hat pulled down where his ears bow out like this, and this weird look on his face. So he basically scalps the doctor to find out where Joe is. Then he stakes out where Joe is and shoots Joe in the legs, incapacitating him. So when Joe comes to, here is the Scalper standing over Maria, admiring her scalp. Now, Jack has a vest with 3 knives on one side and 3 knives on the other side. So he decides to scalp Joe alive because that's what gets him off. So while he's starting to do this, Joe flips 2 karate kicks, hits him on each side, and the knives are driven through his sides, and blood pours out, and Jack the Scalper hits the floor. Well, by now, the rancher is tired of playing with the amateurs and decides to import someone who was in the same sect, martial arts sect, or whatever sect this guy was in. So he brings in this, obviously, Asian hitman. So it's a lot of martial arts, a lot of wire work, and hand gets chopped off. The stump gets seared, burned on, because this guy is tougher than shit, and it ends when Joe actually drives his fist through the guy's chest and pulls his heart out. So, as much as Maria wants to settle down, Joe wants to be a force to be reckoned with in the old Euro-West, righting wrongs, seeking out, punishing evil, and all that sentimental shit that we're used to. So Joe rides off, and there actually was a sequel, but I don't know if Chen Li was in it. I know Kinski was in it, and the director said he was never even approached to do it. He said he pretty much got along with Kinski on that set, but another film, he basically quit the film because Kinski was such a prick to him. I had seen this, and like I said, it's the last film I had seen in my favorite Grindhouse growing up, the Embassy Theater. It was co-billed with Blood of the Dragon, but things were getting a little weird in the theater, so to speak, after Shanghai Joe, so I decided discretion's the better part of valor. Let me just get the fuck out of here before somebody tries to take me off. So that was actually the last time I was in that theater. I guess the Wrecking Ball took it out decades ago. It's a shame because it was a great place, growing up, and I got fond memories of that. But Shanghai Joe got a video release from Transworld Releasing in that big clamshell box, and all these shitty spaghetti western public domain sets put out by various companies like Mill Creek and shit like that have some really bad looking prints of it. But fear not, because our good friends at Wild East Productions have put out a Blu-ray, probably the best and most complete version of Shanghai Joe you can find today. It's a limited edition. You can go to www.wildeast.net and order it off their website, because that's the best deal you're going to get, because already people are picking this thing up and flipping it for 30, 40 bucks, things like that. I believe they're selling it for $18.95 and $5 shipping, and like I said, I just picked this thing up and, you know, had a lot of fun reliving the good old days at the Embassy Theater. But definitely, you know, if you're into martial arts films and spaghetti westerns, you definitely need to see this one. It's violent, gory, bloody, and full of action, so definitely worth checking out. You know, that was a hybrid thing, because, you know, they had tried this again with Lee Van Cleef and The Stranger and the Gunfighter with Lo Lee from Five Fingers of Death, and that was also, the original title of that was Blood Money. That one's, I don't know if you can, that may still be around. I believe that company that put out the Sartana stuff and those spaghetti western sets, Asia, whatever the hell it is, they got it out. I picked it up. It's not bad. It'd be nice if I got a Blu-ray treatment, but yeah. So that's our edition of Grindhouse Purgatory for the end of the month, January 31st, and we'll see you on the flip side. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for tuning in. And if you need anything, feel free to email me at grindhousepurgatory@gmail.com if you need back issues of the magazine, my DVDs, or my autobiography, A Whole Bag of Crazy. So again, thank you. See you on the flip side.